Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Mosaic Podcast. I am so excited today. This is a guy that I never knew. I met him through a service that actually provides speakers to podcasts. And when I read his story and I saw what he did, I became so excited to have the opportunity to talk with Jude, because Jude creates films and documentaries for people that bring out of you the essence of who you are. Let me just read you his bio so we can get that stuff out of the way, okay? Jude Charles is a story-driven filmmaker. Love that. Brand strategist and speaker. For over 13 years, Jude has traveled the world working with world-class brands such as Google, Caldwell Banker, and Steve Harvey, just to name a few. And I'm sure those are just, the topping of the icing on the top of the cake. I'm sure he's got tons of other things. Through his dramatic demonstration of proof methodology, wow, we want to dive into that. Jude helps entrepreneurs bring their story to life through documentaries and videos. He digs deep to find the compelling story that no one else knows, and then leverages it for higher impact. Who would not want that? So with the honor of my heart and soul, I want to bring you Jude Charles. Jude, welcome to the Mosaic Podcast. Thank you for being here with us.
Daniel, thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be here on the Mosaic Podcast.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. So one of the goals that we do here is we want to know the man behind the story. We want to just almost sounds like we are tailor-made for each other, which is why I liked it, because we want to dig deeper than what everybody else sees. So like the three parts that I normally do in the podcast is we start out with who were you before you were what you are today? Who are you today? And what is the hero's journey that brought you there? And then more importantly than who you are or what you did, how can what you do change and help people that are listening, not only through working with you, which I'm sure you're going to have lines of people lining up to do what you do for them, but also in the story of their own life. How can they find tips in that as well? Okay.
Yes.
So let's get started. I always ask the same question to people when we start out. When you were a kid, what did you want to be?
When I was growing up, I wanted to be a police officer, believe it or not.
Wow.
And I was fascinated by, it was almost a bad reason why I wanted to be a police officer. I loved, and I still do love, crime dramas. And I always loved seeing the car chases. And so when I envisioned being a police officer, it was always to be on car chases. It was that adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
And so as an 8-year-old kid, I wasn't the kid outside playing basketball. I wasn't the kid outside playing football with friends, or even inside playing video games. I was the kid at home writing 100-page books. And these were books about what I thought my future life would look like, right? And that one of the books that I wrote was The Police Life of Jude Charles.
Wow.
Another book that I wrote was called The Baseball Life of Jude Charles. And that was inspired by the Jackie Robinson story I had just learned about. And so growing up as a kid, that's who I was. I was fascinated with being able to tell stories and being able to envision what my future life, 20 years down the line, what that would look like.
And so how did that play out for you?
Well, as I grew up, I got into high school and got into a TV production class. And that is ultimately where I began to realize, okay, these stories that I was writing, I could now turn into videos, or I could now turn into films. And so I became obsessive about learning how to take these stories that I could be writing, or even stories like we would do news stories for the school, and learning how to turn that into an engaging and emotional story, emotional video. That's what I became fascinated with. And by my junior year in high school, I had a TV production teacher who taught me everything she knew about video production, because she realized how obsessive I was about it. She taught me everything she knew about it. And at the end of the year, close to the end of the year, she brings me up to her desk and she says, Jude, you're really, really talented at this. I think you should start a business. You should, go out there and make money creating videos for other people. And honestly, I had no idea what it meant to be an entrepreneur. I had no idea what it meant to start a business. But by the following day, she hands me an envelope
Hold
I'm
on,
like,
this is the following day.
the following day.
This isn't like the following year. This is the
No,
following day.
the following day, she hands me an envelope. And I'm like, what is this? She's like, open it. And so I open it and I pull out it was a sheet of paper, a few sheets of paper. And what it really was my first set of business cards. And it
Wow.
was that moment that gave me the courage to say, okay, I guess I can do this.
How old were you?
17 years old.
17.
Yep.
So goodbye police car. Hello video camera.
Yes. Yes. I would be documenting the police chase instead of being in the police car itself. Yeah. Yeah.
Probably not a bad idea.
Right.
So you spoke about it a little bit, but what scared you about that? Like what was the thing that scared you most about walking into this entrepreneurial business?
It was the fear of the unknown. I never had a model, right? I am the youngest of 10 children, right? And my father worked 2 jobs. He was a construction worker Monday through Friday, and Saturday and Sunday he was a private driver. Before the days of Uber and things like that, he was a private driver. And my mother, she was a factory chair manufacturer, so she would put chairs together. And so all throughout my life, that is what I knew. I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. I didn't have any entrepreneurs in my family. And so what scared me the most is, how do I do this? Like, how do I go to someone and say, will you pay me money to record you? And will you pay me enough money that it could be a living, right? Yeah. That's what scared me the most about that.
So do me a favor, go underneath that, because as much as I hear that,
yeah,
to me, that's the surface fear. I just don't know how to do these skills. I don't know but once I learn those skills, then I'll know how to do that. What actually scared you?
What scared me? I think what scared me, if I had to go deeper than that, it would be, I think for sure, failure. I mentioned that I'm the last of 10, took a different, varied journey. I tend to take the road less traveled, and coming from not having anybody in my family being an entrepreneur, getting the support from my family to say, yeah, you should do this. Because obviously what was expected of me is to go out and go to college, earn a degree, get a job like everyone else had done.
Yeah.
I did go to college for the first year and decided to drop out of college because it just wasn't for me. I realized I was already doing what I love to do, and it wasn't for me. So the fear for me was whether or not I would truly get the support of my family, whether or not I would truly be able to succeed. Because again, there's no model, there's no blueprint on how to do this. Yeah, I think for me, that's what it was. It was, I don't know what to do. Now I've got to get over that hurdle, learn the skill, and there's going to take time. It's going to take time to learn it, but I've also got to prove it. Yeah. I've got to prove that I can do this long term, and not just it was some kind of hobby that I was picking up.
Yeah,
yeah,
and
that's what it was.
You know, in a lot of people will say our biggest fears are that maybe we're not good enough, or we're not enough, and so part of what I find in the more that I talk to people is that it's a very common belief that maybe I just can't do this, or maybe my parents won't support me, which is just another way of saying, I don't know that I'm good enough, but if someone supports me, then I'll feel okay and I'll feel encouraged. So did your parents support you as you started to, I mean, you dropped out of college, right? And you went into this entrepreneurial world that nobody in your family, according to you, had known at that point. Mm-hmm. Did they support you, or did they say, come on, Jude, what the heck are you doing? Like, just get a job, get into a factory, do whatever you got to do whatever you got to do?
It took years. It took years before my parents would ever say, all right, we're going to support you on this journey. So no, at first, no, they didn't support me. It took, I think it wasn't until, so I started this journey in 2006. It wasn't until 2014 that they were finally interested to say, okay, what is it that you do?
Wow.
Because we're seeing that as I began traveling and I started working for different type of clients, they were like, okay, we're seeing the success now. What is it that you do? Let's bring me into your world.
So what gave you the courage to deal with the demon inside your head that said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't even know how to do it. I don't know. I don't have my parents' support. I don't have anything. What gave you the courage to continue? Because this is important, because I bet there are people that are listening now that have a desire to do something they know they want to do, but they don't know how to do it.
That's a great
Know,
question.
They don't know if they're good enough, and they don't have the support of their family to do it. Mm-hmm. What gave you the courage? What, as you kept falling down, what gave you the courage to get back up?
What gave me the courage is truly owning the belief in myself, I think. I alluded to this before we jumped on, that first 5 years for me were brutal. First 5 years of business were brutal because I struggled to make money. And for me, what that looked like, struggling to make money, is I struggled to make $30,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And, 17, 18, 19, $30,000 a year is great, right? Like, yeah,
so it's how.
But for me, that wasn't success. That wasn't the idea of me being able to tell my parents, hey, I'm doing this full time and I'm able to support myself, and I'm able to help support you if you needed the help. And so I think what gave me the courage is just, I didn't realize this until later on in life. I have a drive in me to never give up. Just always like figure it out, find a way through. Just being, I mentioned before, I was obsessive. Once I figured out this is a thing that I'm passionate about, I became obsessive over it. And that obsession led me to not having a plan B, not saying that I'm going to give this up. Now, I had thoughts of giving up. I had thoughts of, okay, this is too hard. This is getting way too hard. But ultimately, I never did it. And I think what gave me the courage to get over the idea that my parents wouldn't support me, that my siblings wouldn't support me, is the belief in myself to say, you know what, Jude, sometimes you can't get everybody's support to go do the thing that you know that you can do. It was perspective. I talk about vision and perspective a lot. And the way that I talk about it is you can tell I wear glasses. You wear glasses as well, Daniel.
Yeah.
And we all have eyes. We are born with eyes. We're born with the ability to see. But without the right glasses on, you don't have the right perspective. You're not able to read the things that you can see. We can see shapes, we can see words, we can see colors. But without the right glasses, you may not be able to read the shape, read the words that are coming across your screen, or read the words that are on a billboard. And for me, I had the perspective of, I'm going to take this road less traveled no matter what, and I'm going to figure it out.
Love it.
Yeah, and so that's what gave me the courage. It was just belief in, I can do this. I just needed those small wins.
Yep.
The first one was the teacher saying, you can, I believe in you, that you can do this.
You made your business cards, for God's sake, right?
Right. Right. The second big win for me was a moment where I remember sitting in my bedroom, 5 years in business. And I got to this moment where I was like, all right, Jude, you're still struggling here. Like, you've got to make a decision. Either you're going to continue to go down this route and continue to struggle without a real vision and way out, or you're just going to give it up and say, look, I gave it a good 5 years and it didn't work out. And I remember sitting there, and I had been sitting there for at least 30 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe even. And I get a phone call, and I look at the caller ID, and I remember, like, it said Keisha. And who Keisha was at the time was a client that I had. And it was the very first client that at that point had paid me what I wanted to be paid. Paid me what I felt like my worth was. And we were at the time working on a documentary series called Building the Brand. And it was all about behind the scenes of how she's building her cosmetic company. Mm-hmm. Right. And I was like, do I really want to pick this phone up right now? Like, I'm not in the right headspace to talk to a client. But for one reason or another, I pick up the phone and I'm like, hello? She has all this excitement. She's like, Jude, like, you won't believe it. You won't believe it. And I'm like, what happened, Keisha? And she says, like, I just got off the phone with my accountant, and, I've been doing this business for a year. I've been, we started the cosmetic company from the ground up. And after a year, we've crossed the 7-figure mark. We have done 7 figures in gross revenue.
Wow.
And I remember pulling the phone away from my ear and like, is this really happening right now? Here I am in this moment. I have been struggling to make money in 5 years. And this client that I have has made the money in 1 year. And it was that moment that was the transition moment for me, because I looked at it, when we talked about vision and perspective earlier, I looked at it, I finally had the right lens on.
Yeah.
That it wasn't so much that I couldn't do it, I just didn't have the right help to do it. I didn't ask for the help. Tony Robbins has this quote where he says, being able to ask yourself the right questions gives you the right perspective.
Totally.
And in that moment, I asked myself, what would it look like for me to make $1 million? What do I need to do?
Yeah.
And the reason that unlocked a lot for me is because I had the blueprint. I had to watch Keisha for a year building this business from the ground up. I had seen what she was doing every single day, things that I wasn't doing in my own business.
Yeah.
And so those moments of small wins, of realizing I could have been bitter in that moment. I could have said, you know what, how could she make it and I can't make it?
Yeah.
Right. But instead, I looked at that as, there's a way out here. There's a possibility that I'm not seeing. And I finally got to see that possibility.
So I want to take a couple moments and just highlight some things that you're saying for the people that are listening, because, and I also want to talk with you about perspective, because I'm a big perspective guy.
Yeah.
I'm literally wanting to create something called the 359.
Okay.
Because what we do is we tend to look at situations in life from 1 degree.
Yeah.
But there's 359 other degrees that we can look at.
Yeah. I love it.
And when we incorporate all of those perspectives into the perspective that we have, or we allow other perspectives to come in rather than this tunnel vision of this narrow 1 degree, we start to see the world that we see differently than the world that we see. It isn't just the glasses we put on our face. It's the ability to encompass and include other realities into the reality we know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what I love about your story is that some people would look and say, well, why did it have to take you 5 years to have that conversation? And this person did it in 1 year. Mm-hmm. And like, what's wrong with me that it took me 5 years?
Yeah. But
every single day, every single moment of those 5 years, the desperation, the desire, the fact that you held on to it made you hungry enough mm-hmm. to see when the food was in front of you, you could eat it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you could order off a menu. And we had this conversation in our pre-thing of how menus and role models and following blueprints and all of those things. And we spoke about it. So let's bring that to the table now, because so Keisha gave you now a blueprint that you saw she was doing, and you felt like you could adapt that blueprint to the life that you were living. Is that what happened? Talk about that a little more.
I'll walk through what I did immediately after that happened. And what I immediately did is I started doing online courses, started going to workshops and film workshops, but not just film workshops for learning the skill of filmmaking, but learning the business side, because that's what I lacked. I lacked understanding how to market and promote myself. I lacked the idea of how to talk to clients so that I can give them what they want instead of only talking.
So pause for a minute, because here you are in the video business helping to promote people. And there was a place in you that wasn't sure how to promote yourself.
Yep.
So I want people to just see the demons that exist along the way.
Yes.
That if we live with those demons and invite them into the perspective rather than pushing them out, they open up doors for us to actually find our true calling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is, for me, that's what understanding so you asked me, what did I gain from seeing Keisha? Part of it was that it was the perspective of, okay, what was she doing that I'm not doing? And why does it work? It's not just, let me do what she's doing, but why is she doing what she's doing?
Good. Huge.
Yeah. Because I think we talk about models and we talk about things, menus and things like that. I think what's lacking when we look at different models is not so much copying exactly what the person is doing, but why, what's driving what they're doing. Because often we'll get frustrated when we do the same thing someone else is doing and we realize it's not working for us. Well, it didn't work for you because it wasn't the right thing for you to do.
Beautiful.
right? And so for me, that's what it was. It was going back to figuring out, okay, how do I do this marketing thing for myself? Not necessarily in the same way that Keisha did it, because she did it in a way that was, she used Twitter every single day. She woke up every morning and she was on Twitter and she was engaging with her audience, right? I didn't necessarily want to be tied to my phone and wanted to be tied to a computer in that way. And so the blueprint for me was, how do you tell your story and not just try to get people to buy into what you do? How do you show people who you are? Because who you are matters more than what you can do. Who I am, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to be a police officer because I'm an adrenaline junkie. I still am an adrenaline junkie. That never changed.
Yeah.
Right? I went skydiving for my 30th birthday last November. That didn't change. But how I showed up, how I now introduce that to my clients, how I now bring my clients into my world so that they can connect with me changed. And that's ultimately what I learned from that.
Huge point, because in our previous discussion, which we just had prior to film, I said, you talked about having a model and following blueprints. And I said that I want to challenge you on that. And we had a little conversation and we said, I don't think we're as far away as we might appear. And I love that where we're coming to right now, because when the question isn't what people are doing, the question isn't even what you are doing. The question is, why are you doing what you're doing?
Yep.
And when you can hear from me at least, and I want to get your feedback on this. Mm-hmm. When you can hear from inside yourself, when you can quiet the noise of what's happening around you and go inside yourself and ask yourself, what is it I'm here to do and why? Mm-hmm. Why do I want to do what I want to do? Why do I want to be a policeman? Why do I want to be a videographer? Why do I want to tell people stories? Why do I want to do all that? Why do I want to do whatever the listener wants to do? Right?
Yep.
Versus, how do I make money? Then everything changes, because I practiced meditation and yoga. Now I'm 45 years into it. Okay. So meditation, the yoga's fallen away. I've got the Buddha belly now, not the yoga. But one of the things about meditation and the process of meditation is, when everything else is quiet, what speaks? Mm-hmm. And sometimes the things we chase run away from us.
Oh, yeah.
And the things that are ours run to us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the more we chase things, the more they're going to run away and we're going to get exhausted. Mm-hmm. But mm-hmm. the more we can sit in the quiet and say, what is ours to do?
Yeah.
And just let it come in and then let it guide us out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think we are closer in what we're talking about now that you're explaining it, because
right.
that's your process.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It wasn't that you followed how Keisha did what she did. You looked at why she was doing it,
yep.
created your strategy and said, this is the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
So let's segue a minute. Talk to me about the demons that exist in that process.
The demon of, can I do this, never went away. Having the confidence to, all right, I learned the things that I was learning about business. I learned the things that I was learning about marketing, but do I really have the confidence to show up and say, I'm going to do this? That brings me to a moment where I actually thought about this the other day. The very first time I went from, okay, I'm going to do, because I took off a year. The thing I didn't mention is I took off a year of business. I was still working with Keisha. We did the documentary for 3 years, but I decided not to take on any other clients. My frustration in the moment before that moment with Keisha was, I needed more than Keisha to just pay me what I want. I need more than one client, because if Keisha walks away, everything, business fails.
Right.
But then I realized that was what I needed in the moment, was to only have that focus of working with Keisha. So I took off a year of taking on other clients. I continued to work with Keisha. And once I went through all that training, learned all the things that I was learning, became obsessive about that, I decided to go after another client that had seeked me out, a client that had seen me do a project 4 years before that, and he loved the way I work, and he was adamant about he wanted to work with me. But when between the time that he reached out to me and we had the first meeting, and then I told him I would give him a proposal, it took me a month. And it didn't need to take a month. It took me a month because I was still battling internally.
Yeah.
How do I do this? How do I
what were you actually battling? Like, because I bet you're not the first person that sat down and someone said, write me a proposal. And we don't have any idea what to do in a proposal. You knew what to do in a proposal.
I knew what to do. I didn't have the confidence to ask for the amount of money I was going to ask for.
Why?
Because it was the first time. And I was afraid of that rejection because I had done all this work. I had spent money doing all this work, and now it was time to almost put my energy and my focus on doing this the right way that I know it needs to be done, and still having the possibility of a client telling me no. I hadn't been comfortable with hearing no at that moment. And so I remember walking into the meeting with the guy, going through my entire pitch, and saying, all right, getting to the last page and saying how much this was going to cost. And at the time, this was the most amount of money I had ever asked for. It was $15,000 for the project. And I remember like taking so much time to get to the point. And I got to it and I said, you know what? All right. And I'm internally talking in my head to myself, like, all right, Jude, you got to do this. Like, you've got to just breathe and do it. And what ended up happening is I said it, the amount. I said, all right, this project's going to take $15,000. And in my head, I had already prepared myself for negotiation that he would say too much. Let's figure out how we can cut it down because I was expecting to spend a little bit less, or this is way out of my ballpark, way out of my budget. I sat there and waited for his response, and his response was, all right, great. When do we get started?
Fabulous.
And I was like, what? When do we get started? Like, and I didn't talk him out of it, of course, but in my mind, I'm like, did this really just happen? Like, I sat here and waited for a whole month, meaning I could have gotten this project started sooner. He had already made up his mind.
Yeah.
I could have got the project started sooner, but I had stopped myself. And so that was the demon of finally having the confidence that, all right, you did the work. Now go out and do it relentlessly. Do it with the confidence of, you know what you're doing. Like, you can do this. And I think that was the first moment I finally started walking in a you can do this attitude. No more of being fearful. No more of like trying to talk myself out of it.
So let me call you on that. No more or less more. In other words, in your next proposal, did you go through the same situations, or did you say, screw it, I'm just here?
Sure. The idea, the thought is always there, but then the screw it kind of overtakes it. Okay. Because I begin to live, after that moment, I began to live my life in a way that anything that I was afraid of, I'd go after it. So I mentioned skydiving. Skydiving was actually a surprise for me. It was my 30th birthday and my girlfriend surprised me with skydiving. I had no idea where I was going until we got there. And even leading up to that moment, like when we walk in through the door, they hand us 5 pages of paperwork, and literally on every page it says, you might die.
Right.
And I still went through with it because for me, that's what life is about, is going beyond what I'm afraid of, because ultimately fear is an illusion. It's only when I finally, I realized I landed on 2 feet that, oh, this wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's get you a little off script, because I listened to a talk you gave, and that was you talked about your skydiving, and I love that.
Yes.
What a powerful story, and what a powerful way to share your fear and how you get over it.
Yes.
When you get scared now in terms of sitting in front of somebody to present who you are, do you have certain tools that you use to allow you to sit in your real self and say, look, I can do this. Like, I can go from I can't to I can. What are the tools? What's that process look like for you? Or what's that thought process? Or what's that moment? Or what's that breath? Or what's that connection look like for you?
For me, it is preparation. I am to kind of build that confidence, to kind of get out of my own head, it is preparation. So for example, to take you behind the scenes, I forget how many podcasts at this point I've done, but before I started doing podcasts, before I started being a guest on a podcast, I would do mock podcasts. So in the very same way that attorneys would go and do mock trials before they ever get to court, I was doing mock podcasts. For me, that's kind of what helps build confidence. That's like the first layer.
Mm-hmm.
The second layer is writing it out. The fear that I had with public speaking, or the fear that I had with getting on a podcast and speaking with other people, was almost the idea of not knowing what to say. And so in a way to eliminate that fear, just writing it out so that I can see it. I'm a big visual person. Obviously, yeah. I create videos for other people. Right. And so it was visually being able to see the mock podcast I would record so I can see myself talking. It was the ability to record, to get down on paper, to see it with my eyes and then say, you can do this, right? Still having that conversation with myself, you can do this. So I think, but a big part of it, to answer your question, is preparation. Spending a lot of time, and I probably spend too much time, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's that helps me get over my fears.
So either you're really good at your preparation, which I'm sure you are, or you have another ability that you haven't spoken of yet, which is because you feel prepared, you're able to be spontaneous.
Yeah.
Because I'm not asking you the questions most people would ask you.
Yeah.
Right. And so you couldn't have prepared for the questions I'm asking you for, but your preparation has given you a self-confidence that allows you to be spontaneous.
Absolutely.
And really, for me, that's what I want. This whole podcast for me is about how people think of themselves one way, mm-hmm. and how just one moment can change that. One connection, one piece away in a mosaic, one piece away from where we are as a whole nother world. And so we're one connection, one piece away from seeing the world we see entirely different, the 359, right? Rather than the 1 degree.
Yeah.
And so whether that means you're a homeless person who prays for people and people start coming to you for prayer because they suddenly realize they feel better just walking past you, or whether that means you're somebody who can't do something and all of a sudden believes that they can, or whether that somebody is just somebody who prepares, knowing just exactly what they're going to say so that they can be spontaneous when what they're asked is not what they thought they were going to be asked, but confident in their ability to be who they are. Those are the moments for me that give value to the listener.
Yeah.
Because the listener then can say, who I am now is just who I am now. It isn't who I am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? Who I am is something much bigger than this. It's just I'm limited by what I think I can do right now. Absolutely. But one connection away from that is unlimited possibility.
Absolutely. It is who you, I love that the way you said that, who you are now is not who I am. Because what I am constantly working on is unlocking belief, what I think is possible.
Yeah.
There's an old story, and you might know it, of Roger Bannister, first guy to ever run a 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
And it was the year that he did it, that he unlocked that possibility that allowed many other people to now believe that they could do it.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly looking at, we started this podcast talking about belief, and I'm sorry, not belief, but models. And for me, that's what unlocks the belief, is seeing other models and seeing it's been done before. It can be done in a different way, in a way that I may want to see it done, but it's been done before. Before I began doing documentaries for entrepreneurs, I think I had taken to what sports organizations do. Sports organizations spend a lot of money on creating documentaries of their players. And I've always was fascinated by it, and then always thinking, but why? They're just players on a field.
Yeah.
But they aren't just players on a field. These are the people that they're fans that actually come to watch just the player and not the whole team.
Yeah.
And they understood that. But it was that model that I saw to say, okay, I could do this for entrepreneurs. Because in business, common phrase, we like to do business with people that we know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
Right? Well, how do you get to know, like, and trust an entrepreneur to the point that you're now bought into whatever they have to offer?
Yeah.
What they have to offer is it's secondary. It really doesn't matter. And so, that's why I love the way you say that, because that belief of who you are now is not who you are, is because who you are is still evolving.
Totally.
Who you are is who you are becoming.
Yeah. And one connection away, like as soon as I meet somebody, I may be dead broke, but I'm one connection away from having an opportunity that'll make me have all the wealth that I want.
Yeah.
I may be wondering where my soulmate is going to come from, but I'm one connection away from meeting that person who then becomes my soulmate, and I have the life that I always dreamt of.
Yeah.
We limit ourselves so much by the belief that, in my book, I call there's a chapter called The Road Worker. Mm-hmm. And the road worker is called to fix potholes in roads. And every road, no matter how beautiful it is, and no matter how old it is, no matter how many trees line it or don't line it, eventually will get a pothole. Mm-hmm. And the road worker, that's his job. It's easy for him. He just chips it away, makes space, mixes concrete, pours concrete into the hole, levels it out, repaints the road, and the road's as good as new.
Yep.
But what he watches is the way people approach a pothole. And he finds there's 4 ways people do it. Some people see it from a distance and drive around it, and they're no worse and no better. They just avoided the pothole and went on with their life. Some people drive into the pothole, ruin the whole front end of their car, take it to the shop, get it fixed, and, except for a few scratches and stuff, the car works good as new. The 3rd and 4th people are the ones that interested him the most. Mm-hmm. The 3rd type of person drives into the pothole, ruins the front end of his car, and says nobody will notice. And he drives on with the front end ruined, and everybody sees his front end ruined, but he makes up stories to say, I'm okay and nothing happened, and I'm not going to show you my hurt. But the 4th one drives into the pothole and can't come out. He gets stuck in that pothole, and he doesn't realize 2 inches in front of him is a glorious road that's ready for him to live a life that's way more than he could ever imagine. But that pothole, the more he goes back and forth, gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and he just can't get out. And he doesn't have the courage to ask somebody to help him.
Wow.
And so when the road worker sees those people, he often comes to a pothole and he'll tow somebody out. It's just as easy. I mean, it's not hard. He just says, in order for me to fix the hole, I got to get you out of here. Mm-hmm. So he just tows people off, and all of a sudden, then they can go to the shop, get their car fixed, go on. And if that resonates with anybody for a personal story, then it's a personal story too, right? But it's just the story of the beauty of it is it's just the story of a road worker in a pothole.
Absolutely.
There's no religious significance, no spiritual. He's not a spiritual leader. But if it resonates, it resonates, because the story of ordinary people is what happens.
Yeah. And that 4th story is my story for sure. It is, I was going back and forth in that pothole, not realizing all I needed was a little help.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that story, those 4 different type of people, because I think for sure that 4th person was me. And it wasn't until I had the courage to ask for help. It wasn't until I said, all right, I got to get out of my own way.
Yep.
To find a road worker, to find someone that understood the business side of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That I finally began to see the way forward.
Beautiful. So let's segue. Let's talk enough of all that other stuff. Let's get people involved in what you do.
Yes.
Let's give people an opportunity. Tell us what is your work? What does this idea that you speak of the dramatic demonstration of proof methodology? What is that? And how does that show up in videos? And what makes your videos, documentaries, so special that every single person sitting here should say, I can't believe I don't have one of these for my business or for my life or for my personal profile?
Yeah. for the last about 8 years, I have been focused on story-driven films for entrepreneurs. And why that's important is because um, oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we get caught up in selling the thing that we do, which we kind of started that conversation with.
Yeah.
The thing that we do, not so much selling who we are. And
Pause for a minute.
yes.
Why do people do that? Why do people think that I'm interested in what you're selling me versus who you are and the person behind the sale of the product?
We hide behind what we think people want, which is the thing that we sell. We think that that's all they want. Like, if there's one of my clients that I've had, and is an interior designer, and he used to tell this story about when I first met him. He tells me the story of, he would spend 2 hours in meetings with clients, telling them everything about how he can do their project, how he can remodel their home. And in his mind, it's simple. I do this, which is A, they want this, which is B, and that equals C. C is me providing that for them. And so I think we hide behind it because it's easier to hide behind it. It's hard for us to talk about ourselves. It's not easy for people to come on like we're doing now, to get on a podcast and talk about ourselves.
So can I reshape that? Because
Yes.
I think a lot of people talk about themselves, but they talk about the surface or periphery of themselves. And
Sure.
I think if you had somebody talking a video and just talking of how great they are and how much they do and how fabulous they are and who they've worked with and all that stuff, they've spent a lot of time talking but haven't told you anything about themselves.
Sure. Yes.
What's hard for people to do is show the vulnerable. And I want to really compliment you because we don't know. I'm an imperfect stranger to you.
Yes.
I'm not even a perfect stranger. We met 4 minutes ago, right? And you've allowed me the opportunity to ask you not superficial things,
Mm-hmm.
but what touches your heart. And without knowing it, I think I'm doing in this podcast something similar to what you do in your videos.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Where you become a vulnerable, real person who I really like.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to you, hey, I want you to help me do a video.
Right.
Because I like you and I know that you have the vulnerability to be able to draw that out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Makes sense. Absolutely. Vulnerability is a big piece of it. I often tell my clients, no one cares about how great you are because everyone's telling that story.
Totally.
The story that there's a few different stories I look for, but the story that you want to think about is, again, it starts with why. Why are you doing this work? Why should I care that you're doing this work? What has led you to this moment, the ups and downs? I'm working on a documentary series now with a woman named Tracy Lynn, who has a very successful business, 35,000 consultants. She runs a direct selling business, doing jewelry, multi-million-dollar business. But in our documentary, she talks about those moments of not realizing if the company would continue. Just as recent as 3 years ago, not realizing if the company would continue, needing to reinvent herself. A company that she had been running for over 10 years, needing to reinvent herself to continue the company. So when I'm working with clients, those are kind of the stories that I'm looking for, because when I talk about who you are, those are the things that really shows who you are. Those are your core values that people really care about. Because it's the same way we make friendships. It's something that you said that I've now attached myself to, that I like that you said. It matches my core values and what I believe in. And now I want to be your friend. Now I want to have a relationship with you. And so dramatic demonstration of proof is a piece of that. It is taking those words that you say, those stories that you tell me, and bringing it to life. Because unfortunately in 2019, 2020, there's an incredible amount of noise and distractions out there. How do you get past that so that people really get to the core of who you are? How I do that is there's really 6 different ways, but I'll start with the first 3. I look at what's happening behind the scenes. What are you really thinking? What are you really doing when no one's looking? The way that I convey that to my clients, often I tell the story of the wallet in Starbucks. Me and you, Daniel, are in Starbucks and we see a wallet on the ground. It's only me and you in the Starbucks. Only me and you and the cashier, but the cashier's in the back. Now I decide I'm going to pick up that wallet and I'm going to go out of my way and call for the cashier in the back. Hey, cashier, I need you to come get this wallet because someone forgot their wallet. We've seen that there's cash hanging outside of this wallet, right? And I decide to turn back in that wallet. That moment of me turning back in that wallet says a lot more about me than anything else, because you've gotten the chance to see what I would do when no one is looking.
Yeah.
It's only me and you. And that's that behind the scenes, is what is happening when no one is looking.
Well, the other thing I like about what you're saying is that I can spend all the time till I'm blue in the face talking about trying to tell you how honest I am.
Yeah.
But when I tell you a story that shows you my honesty, you can make that decision for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It takes you on a journey that allows you to have the perspective that I'm not telling you to have.
Right.
I'm allowing you to go on that journey for yourself and make that decision.
Totally.
That is much more powerful as human beings when we can make the decision ourselves. That's what we're always seeking.
Step 2?
Step 2 is live illustration. So that is being able to do things like this, like podcasts, and being able to educate a client or educate your audience on how something works, but through a story format, right? And then step 3 is social proof. That's really easy. It's what do other people have to say about you? Because you're going to talk about, the good things, and you may even get a little vulnerable, but there's other things that you don't even realize that's great about you that other people value. And so those are the 3 types of stories that I look for first when I'm looking to do dramatic demonstration of proof.
So your videos go about how long normally?
It ranges. So it can be anywhere from 5 minutes to the longest that I've done is 2 hours. But
2 hours, wow.
Yes. Yeah. So the one that we're doing now collectively is 2 hours. It's a 6-part documentary series. Each episode is about 20 minutes. And so, yeah, that's about 2 hours worth of content that someone would watch.
And so for people that are doing videos on their own that might not be able to afford to hire you, or may be able to afford to hire you, but they're just making videos. Is there a standard length of video that the mind wants to watch? Like I've heard people say, you want to keep your videos to 3 to 5 minutes, because after that people are going to get bored with it and they're going to turn on to something else. Or is it that yet we go to movies that are almost 2 hours long, right? And we sit, strapped into our chair, watching compelling movies that we stay that long. So what makes a video watchable, and what would be the standard length of a video for people that want to do them on their own that would make sense for people to watch? So
standard length, it doesn't really matter, right? I just mentioned to you 10 minutes and 2 hours. I'd honestly say the longer the better, but what matters more is the engagement. What is happening? If we're just sitting in front of a screen talking, that's not as engaging as a lot of movement, as emotion, as telling stories like we're doing here. Like that's what makes it engaging, right? What I would often encourage people to do is there's 4 parts, but there's location, there's access, there is participation. So actually having a conversation, even if you're standing in front of a computer screen, having a conversation so that people feel engaged. The reason that I love doing documentaries is because it allows me to get access to my client in a way that most people wouldn't see. And it allows me to jump to different locations. With this Tracy Lynn documentary that I mentioned, we are in our office at one point. We're in a warehouse at another point. We're seeing her in a speaking engagement. There's all these different access points that makes it engaging. It's not just one place. What makes a video boring and why someone would tune off after 5-7 minutes is you haven't given them something worth watching. Yeah. Time doesn't matter. It's how engaging are you making it so that someone wants to watch. Like how entertaining are you? And not entertaining like you have to be over the top like a Gary Vaynerchuk type of personality or Tony Robbins. But people can read out authenticity.
Totally.
Right? Like
totally.
They can read that out. And I often just, that's the biggest thing. Don't sit in front of a camera and just talk. Be creative with it.
Totally. Let me ask you, what's one thing that you thought you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt But then the more you've worked with people and done videos with them, you realize that wasn't really true at all. There was something else that you learned. And what was that you learned?
It's a great question.
Every once in a while, a blind squirrel catches a nut,
Yeah. There's a thread that I think I've realized I've been blessed to work with a lot of successful entrepreneurs in their own right? Like I've mentioned Tracy Lynn, but I'm sure there's many people listening that have no idea who she is.
Right.
Running a great organization. That specific documentary is called Relentless. And I think that is the theme of not only my life, but of every entrepreneur that I've been able to attract with the kind of work that I do. They have a relentless spirit in them that pushes them to keep going no matter what. Steve Harvey was another project that I did. It wasn't a documentary, but it was a shorter video where we talk about, it's a book tour that he does, and what you're listening to as you're seeing shots of this book tour is his core story, being homeless for 3 years, almost giving up because he had to wash himself up in bathrooms. And there was this one day he was in a big hotel washing himself up in the bathroom, and men kept coming in and he didn't want them to see him.
Yeah.
So he didn't have the time to wash up. And he almost gave up that day, but he didn't. And it was the following week, I believe, that he got a call to be the host at the Showtime at the Apollo, and that changed everything. That relentless spirit, that relentless drive, filming the Tracy Lynn documentary, as we're filming it, the fulfillment warehouse that actually ships out all of her products to these consultants that keeps the business running goes out of business. How do you get through that? $5 million worth of merchandise in a building that goes out of business. Got to figure it out.
So highlight for me again, because what was the thing that you knew? Don't sell me now on the things that the people you created, because we'll put all that below. What's the thing that you knew going into this that proved not true? And what did you learn from the thing that once that wasn't true anymore, what did you actually have the ability to learn?
I think why I mentioned that is because I had this idea in my head that the person that's successful is much different than who I am. Much different in the sense that they're smarter, that they have figured something out that I couldn't figure out. I always had that in my head, that the difference between me, a person like me, and a Steve Harvey is this level of smartness. And not to say that these people are dumb or anything like that, but I think that what I realized was the true underlying factor is this idea that I may have messed up, something may have gone wrong, but if I just keep pushing forward, it'll all work out.
So you learned relentlessness through all this. Relentless desire to just continue to get there, no matter what. Nobody's smarter, nobody's less smart. It's the sheer energy of continuing to continue. It's
a mental game. Yeah. It is a mental game of, we talked about belief. Do you believe in yourself enough to keep going?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard when you feel like you're defeated, you feel like you failed here, and you got to keep going. You feel like you've made the mistake, but you got to keep going.
Yeah.
So Perfect. Yeah, I learned that. Yep.
Tell people how they can get in touch with you. And then I want to close with a question that I always close with. But before that, I want to make sure people have a chance to see your videos, to see how to get in touch with you, to see how to work with you, to get to know you in all the ways, because it's not about just the videos he's creating. You want to get to know this man. This man's a heartfelt, gentle man that is a gentleman who has your back in the videos that he's making, and he wants to create you and showcase you to a world that doesn't necessarily get a chance to see you through your hype.
Yes.
But they do get a chance to see you through who you are. And he wants to show that to people so that you get more people. How would I sign up to get involved with you?
It's really simple. The best way to connect with me to have a conversation. Let's actually get on the phone and have a conversation. It is through my website. It is judecharles.co. That's my website to see some of the other stories of entrepreneurs that I have worked with, and also to just let's have a conversation. See how I work. It's on the website how I work with my clients, and let's bring your story to life in a way that has never been done before. Let's really bring out the real story, not the story you've shared, not the story you've made up for other people.
I can't encourage you guys enough to go and do that, because I think that the more stories we hear that are real, the more everything unreal falls apart. So with that being said, the question that I always ask with a follow-up question to end every podcast is this the world that we're living in right now? Is this the world that you always dreamed of handing over to your children and to your children's children?
That is a loaded question. The world that I envisioned, we live in a very divisive world now, but it's only divisive if we allow it to be.
Okay. So you're answering the second part of the question. The first part of the question is, with the divisiveness that exists in the world, is this the world that you always dreamed that you would want to hand over to your children and your children's children? It can be as simple as a yes or a no.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if it's not the world, which it isn't, what do you see that we need to work on, or we need to elevate, or we need to adapt or grow or change into, that would make us live in a world that you would happily hand over to your children and your children's children? What would be that thing that you would recommend people do?
We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but it's the way I live my life, is depth versus width. It is a lot of what we've talked about today. It is vulnerability, is that empathy. It is being able to have conversations, real conversations, not the, hey, how are you doing? But really stopping to figure out how someone is doing, how their day is going. It is that depth. The business model that I've built in my business, and it's far different than what I saw modeled with Keisha Dior. Keisha was running a business where she was selling e-commerce lipstick, right, or cosmetics. So that means she had hundreds of thousands of clients. In my business, I only take on 5 projects a year, 5 clients a year.
Wow.
And so, but it's depth, because I live and breathe my clients' business. I live and breathe their brand. I really try to get to know who they are so I can get to the truth and not the thing that they've made up. And so the world that I want to leave to my children, the thing that I want to teach to my children is, if you're going to make a connection, make a real connection, not a connection that is superficial because of something you may want, right? Make a real connection, because it's those real connections, that real empathy, that helps us understand each other. If we take the time, at least, it helps us understand each other so that we can make this world a better place.
So I love that, because my book's called The Mosaic.
Yes.
When you think about a mosaic, you think about pieces that connect with each other.
Yes.
Pieces that are shattered, broken, whole, big, small, different colors, different shapes, different textures. None of that matters.
Yeah.
What matters is when we stand back and we look at the artistry of what happens when we really connect. And we don't have to connect like this, side to side. Sometimes it's just corner to corner. Sometimes most of what we believe is not what we share.
Right.
But the fact that we can find that place that we do share creates a mosaic that allows it to be whole.
Yes.
And we live in a world now where we focus so much on what we don't agree on rather than what we do agree on. What would happen in this world of mosaic, in this beautiful mosaic that we all are pieces of, if we would come together and hold that belief strong?
Yes.
And I do want to talk to you offline about a project that I'm doing, because it is exactly in harmony with what you're doing. And it's about creating a docu-series about the voice of the voiceless, about listening to the people that nobody listens to, because our voices that we hear are really one degree of the 359. Yeah. But there is a 359 out there that would make this world so much more rich.
Yeah.
so much more palpable, so much, there's solutions out there that we're looking past because we think that our answers are going to come from the one degree, but they don't.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons why I'm intoxicated with our conversation is because I see a man who's making stories that are real stories that will allow the voice of the voiceless to be heard. And I can't encourage my listeners more than to get in touch with him, because real stories create real people, create real connections, create real solutions, create a real world.
Absolutely. I love the work you're doing, Daniel. It is truly the heart of the kind of work that I'm doing as well. And I love it. I love it. Absolutely.
So let's see if we can play together and grow each other and do that, but we'll take that offline.
Yes.
Okay. For those of you listening, we will put Jude's information in the show notes once we get it posted. And one more time, please don't just allow this conversation to pass by. If it's resonated with you and you want to have a video that shows that, he only takes 5 people, so you better get in line quick. And so do that. If there's anything I can do to help you in the work that I do, to help you connect in deeper to your soul, to allow you to feel what your story really is, we can then do that. Then take that message to be videoed. That would be great, or whatever you decide. But if we are going to live in a world that we want to hand over to our children, and we don't believe this is that world, then it's time for us to do something different. So for all of you Mosaic people out there that are ready to make a difference and do something different, let's create dialogue. Thank you. And until next show, we look forward to you coming. Jude, thank you again for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
My honor.